The history of human wars and bloodshed is as old as human civilization. For many reasons, from increasing the amount of land to extracting mineral resources and achieving independence, several tribes, nations, states, or empires have engaged in wars with each other. Although this horrific event called war is widespread, different wars have taken place in the pages of history at different times for different reasons. In this video, I will tell you about one such historic war. In the war that took place in the first half of the 20th century, not only several nations or empires, but also the entire world were involved. And the amount of casualties in this war was not even in all the wars of the previous few thousand years combined. Surely you have understood that we are talking about the First World War. In total, more than 70 million people from different sides took part in this war. Officially, this war, which started on July 28, 1914, and lasted until November 11, 1918, lost at least 25 million people, including about 15 million civilians. Dear viewers, without further ado, let's learn about the history of the First World War in today's main video. To understand the causes of World War I, we need to go back to the events that occurred about 70 years before the war. At that time, the world map was not divided into hundreds of countries. Rather, most of the world's landmass was under the control of a superpower in Europe or Asia. Among these superpowers in Europe were the British, French, and Austro-Hungarian empires. Among the superpowers in Asia were the Japanese, Russian, and Ottoman empires. By the mid-19th century, nationalist sentiment was growing throughout Europe and Asia. As a result, the Kingdom of Sardinia, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, declared independence in 1848. 7 years later, with the military support of France, the Sardinian army defeated Austro-Hungarian and occupying forces. Inspired by Sardinia's example, several neighboring states united against Austro-Hungarian colonial advances and emerged as the Kingdom of Italy. The war between these two parties is considered the Italian War of Independence. Taking advantage of this instability in the southern part of the empire, the army of the Kingdom of Courland, located in the north, entered the Austro-Hungarian border. In 1867, after defeating the powerful Austro-Hungarian army, Courland established a state empire called the North German Federation, which took over a large part of that empire. 5 years later, this federation took over the southern German states that were under the control of neighboring France. In 1871, France transferred control of those states through an international treaty at the Palace of Versailles in the French city. Thus began the journey of a state called Germany. After emerging as a unified Germany, the state began activities to strengthen its economy. And to increase its power in the international arena against France, Germany established friendly diplomatic relations with the then Russian and Austro-Hungarian empires. In the second half of the 19th century, there was great political unrest in various regions of Asia, like Europe. In the Balkan region, which was under the control of the Ottoman Empire in 1877, there was intense dissatisfaction with the ruling class among the public. Taking this opportunity, Russia, known as the eternal enemy of the Ottoman Empire, further incited the nationalist spirit spreading in the Balkan region. As a result, that part of the Ottoman Empire broke up, and 4 new independent states were born, namely Monsignor, Serbia, Bulgaria, and Romania. European superpowers like Germany and Austro-Hungary could not accept the Russian intervention in the Balkan region. To prevent a recurrence of this incident in the future, these two empires formed a military alliance in 1880. At this time, a diplomatic struggle began between France and Italy over the establishment of a colony in Tunisia, in North Africa. France established a colony in Tunisia despite Italy's protests. To avenge this humiliation, Italy joined hands with France's arch-enemy, Germany, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. As a result, the bilateral military alliance became a tripartite alliance. After establishing its dominance in mainland Europe, Germany turned its attention to other continents of the world. In 1884, the German government organized a summit conference in Berlin to obtain international approval for the establishment of colonies in various regions of Africa and Asia. The conference, known as the Berlin Conference, was attended by top representatives of European superpowers such as Britain and France. The conference imposed certain conditions for the establishment of new colonies. But without complying with those conditions, Germany occupied the west coast of Africa and some regions of Asia and established colonies there. Alarmed by such aggressive behavior of neighboring states, France and Russia, located on the eastern and western edges of Germany, signed a secret military agreement in 1890. Then, in 1902, France signed another secret agreement with Italy. According to that agreement, the two states agreed not to engage in war with each other. On the other hand, Germany started working to strengthen bilateral relations with the Ottoman Empire. Among the projects implemented for this purpose, the construction of the railway line from Berlin to the Ottoman Empire's Baghdad city in 1905 is particularly noteworthy. As a result of this railway line, Germany established direct communication with the oil-rich Mesopotamia region. The British Empire also had a tempting view of the mineral oil in this region. As a result, Britain's anxiety increased because the relationship between Germany and the Ottoman Empire was so close. At the same time, Germany also increased the power of its navy many times over. As a result, the world's sea routes were in danger of returning to the exclusive dominance of the British Royal Navy. To deal with the situation, Britain signed a secret agreement between France and Russia in 1907. The alliance formed between these three superpowers is known as the Triple Alliance. Thus, at the beginning of the 20th century, the whole of Europe was divided into two great alliances. On the one hand, the Triple Alliance consisting of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. On the other hand, the Triple Alliance, consisting of Britain, France, and Russia, began a war of nerves between the two opposing alliances over influence in the Balkan region from the beginning of the second decade of the 20th century. Among the states that emerged from the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, Serbia began working to form a separate nation-state called Yugoslaviansk in the Balkan region. Although Serbia was independent, parts of this nation-state, such as Bosnia and Herzegovina, were under the control of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Russia played the role of one of the instigators behind Serbia's conflict against the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Due to this conflict, the Hungarian Archduke Francis Ferdinand was shot and killed by a Serbian armed revolutionary. Ferdinand's wife also lost her life in the attack on June 28, 1914. In retaliation, Austria-Hungary launched a military campaign in the Balkan region on July 28. Historians have called this day the official start of World War I. Germany, which had become the world's largest superpower by then, supported Austria-Hungary's attack on the Balkans. On the other hand, neighboring Russia stood behind Serbia. In order to confront the Austro-Hungarian army, they started as a Parthian army on the western border. In response, the German army began implementing its predetermined war plan, the Schlieffen Plan. Under this plan, Germany declared war on Russia on August 1st. However, instead of deploying troops on the eastern border, the country's army did not occupy Luxembourg in the west. The reason for such a strange war plan was that Berlin was aware of the secret military agreement between Russia and France. The German army knew that declaring war on Russia would also lead to war with France. And if Germany had to participate in two wars on the eastern and western borders at the same time, there was a high risk of Germany being destroyed. Therefore, the main objective of this war plan of Germany was to eliminate all possible threats to its western side before Russia completed its deployment of troops on its western border. According to the S-Leven plan, the German army was supposed to reach France through neutral Belgium. But on August 2nd, the Belgian government announced that it would not allow the German army to pass through its country. They said that this ban was imposed because it was a neutral country. In response, the German army did not occupy Belgium the next day. On the same day, Germany officially declared war on France. The next day, Britain also officially entered the war. As an ally of neutral Belgium, they declared war on Germany on August 4th. Japan, one of the superpowers in Asia, was an ally of Britain at that time. Therefore, they also declared war on Germany that month. Another notable event in the first month of World War I was the surprise attack by the Russian army on the German and Austro-Hungarian borders. Although this attack on the northern German border was not very effective, the southern Austro-Hungarian army began to retreat in the face of this attack. The Western and German armies, such as the Papal border, saw considerable success in the early part of the war. In the face of attacks on them, the combined forces of France and Britain retreated from the French border and set up defenses in the Marly area in early September. At the same time, the German army's advance towards Paris was halted by a desperate attack by the French reserve forces. Then, both German and Allied forces began operations to capture the coastal cities of Belgium. At this stage of the war, one of the two armies began to stagnate. By October, both sides had dug in for about 700 kilometers from the North Sea in the north to the border of neutral Switzerland in the south. This month, Britain and Germany began using their naval and air forces against each other, as well as their armies. The warships of the British Royal Navy established a blockade along the German coast. In response, Germany began using its submarines. In the second decade of the 20th century, there were no advanced aircraft within reach. As a result, at the beginning of World War I, aircraft were used only for observing enemy movements. However, pilots soon began to bomb camps in addition to observing. Germany, however, also used the Sammlern, known as the Yarshib. German airships attacked France twice, and at least 50 towns in England. The Ottoman Empire entered the war in early November 1914. The Ottomans declared war on the Russian Empire, as the Russian army was busy fighting Hungary and Germany in their eternal rivalry. Clashes broke out between the two sides in the Russian-Ottoman border area in the Caucasus region. Taking this opportunity, Britain sent a large army to the shores of the Persian Gulf. Most of the members of this force were residents of British-ruled India. In response, the Ottoman army launched a military campaign to capture the British-controlled Suez Canal in Egypt. As in the Caucasus region in the north, the Ottoman military campaign in the Sinai Peninsula in the south failed. The Ottoman rulers identified the non-Muslim population of Armenia as the main reason for this failure in the north. In retaliation, they carried out genocide throughout Armenia. Almost half of the population of Armenia lost their lives in this brutal genocide carried out in February 1915. In May of that year, the British passenger ship Lusitania was sunk by a German submarine in the North Atlantic Ocean. More than 1,200 people lost their lives. Among the dead were 128 American citizens. The United States government strongly condemned the incident. Germany reduced its use of submarines militarily to prevent the United States from getting involved in the ongoing global war. In July 1915, Italy changed its mind and joined the Triple Entente. They then began military operations targeting the borders of their former ally, Hungary. Like Italy, the Balkan country Bulgaria also changed its alliance at this time. However, they joined the German Grand Alliance by tagging the Triple Alliance. After changing sides, Bulgaria launched a military campaign to occupy Serbia. As a continuation of this, the British and French Allied forces sent troops to the coast of Greece, which had been neutral in the war until then. That is, by the end of 1915, Switzerland was the only neutral country where no conflict took place in this war. In February of the following year, the German army intensified its attack on its western border. At this time, their military campaign to occupy the French city of Ferdowsi is famous in history as the Battle of Ferdowsi. This campaign, which began on February 21st, continued until December 18th. This Battle of Ferdowsi was the longest conflict of the First World War. It involved about 75 divisions of the German army against at least 50 divisions of the army. In total, about 380,000 soldiers of the French side lost their lives in that conflict, and the number of German soldiers killed was about 340,000. In total, about 720,000 soldiers were killed on both sides of this conflict. That is, the number of casualties was about 2,500 per day. In the Middle East of the Asian continent, the British and French joint forces were forced to retreat in the face of combined resistance from the Ottoman and German armies. To deal with the situation, in May 1916, Britain and France entered into a secret agreement called the MIA, dividing the Middle East occupied by the Ottoman Empire between themselves. This agreement, known as the Sina-Speak Agreement, is seen as one of the reasons for the instability in the Middle East. In order to implement this controversial agreement, Britain incited Arab nationalist forces against the Ottomans. As a result of this fuel, the Arabs started an armed movement demanding independence from the Ottomans from the city of Mecca, now Saudi Arabia. In the same month, the world's largest naval battle took place between the German and British navies in the North Sea. A total of 151 ships of the Royal Navy participated in that battle, known as the Battle of Châtillon. In addition to the 78 destroyers, there were 28 battleships, 26 light cruisers, 9 battle cruisers, and 8 armored cruisers. On the other hand, out of the 99 German ships that participated in this war, there were 16 battleships, 11 light cruisers, 5 battle cruisers, and 61 torpedo boats. In the three-day conflict that began on May 30th, 1916, and lasted until June 1st, 1916, a total of 14 ships of the British Navy were sunk, and the number of lives lost was more than 6,000. In contrast, the number of ships sunk by the German Navy was 11, and more than 2,500 German soldiers lost their lives. In July 1916, another bloody conflict took place between the Germans and the Allies. The conflict, known as the Death of the Somme, lasted from July 1st to December 18th of that year. Between 300,000 and 350,000 soldiers on each side took part in this war. This was the first time the British Army had used tanks on the battlefield. The British naval blockade, which had been in place for over a year, had led to severe famine throughout the German Empire in the winter of 1916. The economic situation of both sides, having been at war for almost 2 years, had become deplorable. But with the support of the United States behind France and Britain, these countries did not become so severe. In response to the change in the situation, the German Navy resumed its submarine attacks across the Atlantic Ocean. Not only that, the German government sent a telegram to the head of the government of Mexico, a neighbor of the United States, in January 1917. The message, known as the Zimmermann Telegram, called on Mexico to launch a military operation on the southern border of the country. Unfortunately for Germany, British intelligence was able to intercept the telegram before it reached its destination. The telegram was presented to the United States government instead of Mexico. In retaliation for this provocation, the United States declared war on the German alliance in April 1917. Meanwhile, in March of that year, a revolution began against the ruling regime in Russia. According to the Julian calendar, it was February. This revolution is better known as the February Revolution. As a result of that revolution, the four Tsars in Russia were abolished. Although the new government initially continued to fight against Germany, the Russian army soon began to retreat in the face of the advanced tactics of the invading forces. In December 1917, Russia was forced to surrender to Germany. Due to this surrender and the simultaneous Bolshevik Revolution, they were busy dealing with a civil war instead of a world war. After the threat from the east was eliminated, Germany deployed its full force in the west by the spring of 1918. But by then, 5 million American troops had joined the war on the side of the Allies. Faced with the successive attacks of this fresh force, the German army, which had been in danger for several years in Africa, Asia, and all parts of Europe, was forced to retreat. At the same time, another member of the alliance, Armagh and the Ottoman Empire, were in danger from internal nationalist revolutions and two-pronged attacks by external Allied forces. As a result, the Ottoman Empire surrendered to the Allies on its own terms in October 1918, and Armagh in November. At the same time, the German emperor, who held the title of Kaiser, was forced to abdicate in the face of revolution in Germany. Instead, the new democratic government, hoping to regain power in the German Empire, decided to surrender to the Allied forces. According to that decision, Germany signed the surrender document in Versailles, France, on November 11, 1918. This agreement is known as the Treaty of Versailles. This officially ended the First World War, which had lasted for more than 4 years.